Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to this week's Black Mental Health Matters podcast, where we discuss mental health issues confronting the Black community throughout the diaspora. We invite a range of mental health professionals from around the world to discuss and share resources on how we can tackle mental health issues in our community. For today's episode, I'm your host, Erica Dolland. On today's show, we'll be exploring the topic of sleeping disorders in the Black community. Our first guest to help us unpack this topic is Roy Compton. Roy is a human neuroscience and clinical neuropsychiatry graduate. His master's thesis explored the dream-mentation and movements in type 1 narcolepsy and idiopathic REM sleep behavior disorder. As a dual heritage Black person, his goal is to put lived experience into a scientific context to support Black mental health. Roy, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, Roy, so before we get into exploring sleeping disorders, I think it's really important that we put into context what is considered sleep health. So if you could help us look at that at a kind of a granular focus, what are the characteristics of having a good sleep?
So this is it. So sleep is such a dynamic and plastic experience that there isn't necessarily one phrase to answer that, because it depends on your age and your location from the equator. What we can say is that sleep health is a measure of your quality of sleep. And your quality of sleep is decided by your sleep architecture, sleep duration, and sleep fragmentation. But what are those three things? So good architecture is getting 4 to 6 sleep cycles per night, right? And those sleep cycles should create a repetitive passage through a specific pattern of sleep stages, 4 of them in total. So the first 3 sleep stages are basically taking you from light sleep down to that deep restorative sleep. And the last stage is REM sleep, which is your dream sleep. So what we do know is that one sleep cycle is about 90 minutes. So if you're meant to get 4 to 6 sleep cycles, then what we're looking at is a sleep duration of about 6 to 9 hours. That's what good sleep would look like. So any naps should be short enough that you don't go into deep sleep, or long enough that you've completed a whole cycle. And the last thing about fragmentation, that, as the name implies, good sleep would be a sleep where you fall asleep and then you wake up at the very end. Not a sleep where you're waking up every 30 minutes or once on the hour due to noise or stress or some sleep disorder.
Okay. You know, what's interesting about what you're highlighting is that this idea that sleep is supposed to happen in intervals, right?
Yeah.
And, you know, I think a lot of times if I just, happen to go to bed at 9 o'clock at night and I wake up at, 6 o'clock, even if I get up in the middle of the night to, do a little something here and there, I'm getting a proper sleep. But what I'm hearing you say is that those intervals of sleep are absolutely fundamental and essential to getting a good night rest.
Absolutely. Like your sleep, as I was saying with the nap, because the nap is a good example, if your nap is short enough that you're not going into the deep sleep, then when you wake up from a short 20-minute nap, you feel refreshed. You just had that light sleep. But if you're waking up after like an hour or 50 minutes, your body was in the middle of that really deep restorative sleep. That sleep where you try to wake someone up and you need to actually like nudge them quite a few times to wake up, because the body's you've kind of paused consciousness for a while. Your body,
Mm.
your brain waves are doing something completely different. You're cleaning your brain at that time. So it's really important for the sleep cycle. I think it's all happened to us before where one time we might have slept for 10 hours, woken up really groggy. Another time we might have slept for 6.5 hours and like we can do the whole day. And that just shows the
Mm.
effect of the sleep cycle, the 90-minute interval.
So can we oversleep? I mean,
Yeah.
what if somebody has slept for a good 14 hours or 15 hours night sleep? Is that considered a healthy sleep or is that considered an inappropriate sleep?
Inappropriate, for sure. Inappropriate. So, I mean, oversleeping, you could think of it in two ways. There's oversleeping as a symptom, and then there's oversleeping in and of itself. So, if you were sleeping for 14 hours, what that tells me is that you're trying to catch up on some sleep deprivation. If you're sleeping for
Mm.
14 hours, that means for the past few days, you've been sleeping not enough or not good quality because your body shouldn't need 14 hours of sleep to feel refreshed,
I'm
basically.
exaggerating a bit, but yes, I definitely do see your
No,
point.
but I mean, yeah, no, I know the 14 hours is the exaggeration, but it's also that oversleeping itself isn't good either. Like, oversleeping can worsen inflammation, it can help lead to obesity, it can lead to chronic diseases.
Mhm.
So, but the main thing is that if someone is oversleeping, so let's say more than 9 hours, then that person's sleep deprived and they need to balance their weekly sleep schedule a little bit better.
Okay, okay. So now that we have a firm understanding of what good sleep health is, maybe you can give us some insight into what are different types of sleep disorders and what are some symptoms that we could be looking for to help diagnose it?
Sure. So there are 6 categories of sleep disorders, and each of the 6 are quite different from the other. So the first one are the insomnias. And that's the sleep disorder that a lot of us think about when we think of a sleep disorder. So the main symptom there is that you have trouble falling asleep or staying asleep. So you see how that relates to the sleep health because it's affecting duration and also fragmentation.
Mm.
And examples of that include chronic insomnia and short-term insomnia. So chronic being an insomnia that just doesn't go away and can't be helped, and short-term is an insomnia that might be a bit situational. That's the first cluster. The second cluster are these things called the sleep-related breathing disorders. Now, the symptoms there are abnormal respiration during sleep. And this cluster ranges from mild to having a fatal impact on your health. But the good news about this cluster is that they are quite manageable. So an example here is obstructive sleep apnea, which quite a few of us have heard, and that's where you
Mhm.
experience partial or complete closure of the upper respiratory airway.
Mhm. Mhm.
And also, like, chronic snoring is also counted as a sleep disorder here, but again, that falls much more on that mild level rather than obstructive sleep apnea. It's more just annoying, especially for your partner if they're in bed with you. But yeah, but the snoring, the main thing with the snoring, that's quite a common, like much more kind of apparent breathing disorder. Snoring itself isn't a problem, but it's more snoring could be so noisy it's disturbing your sleep.
Yes.
So that would have the issue. The third cluster are opposite to the insomnias. They are the hypersomnias. So the hypersomnias, they are where you have too much sleep. You have excessive sleepiness. But it is different from feeling tired all the time, because tired all the time, that's like fatigue. The thing with the hypersomnias is that you sleep and you sleep and you sleep, but you don't feel refreshed. You
Mm.
will have naps all throughout the day, but still sleep a full amount at night. So, an example here is narcolepsy. And that's just where you, as we're talking here, you would just kind of fall asleep. Then you have excessive daytime sleepiness, where you are constantly taking naps during the day. And again, despite all the sleep, you're just not feeling refreshed.
Mhm.
So now we're moving on to the last 3 clusters. So the fourth one are called the circadian rhythm sleep wake disorders. And some of us have heard this term circadian rhythm, but what is that? That's the scientific word for your body clock. And this is actually where you'll find a sleep disorder that most of us have experienced: jet lag. Jet lag falls in this cluster, so it's a really good disease to look at what this whole cluster is. It's where your body clock has fallen out of sync with your environment.
Okay.
That's how it happens. And that often happens when you're flying over lots of multiple time zones. But something else is shift work disorder. And what is that? That is where somebody has a type of job where they have to work at a time where they would normally want to sleep.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that kind of, you can see how that mimics actually jet lag, because now
Mhm.
you have to be awake at nighttime and you have to sleep at daytime, but you want a social life. So
Yes.
you end up staying awake, and the
Yes.
symptoms there: insomnia, excessive sleepiness. Here's a disorder that's also very relevant for the Black community as well, because of the types of jobs that would expose you to the shift work disorder
Mhm.
and how Black people are systemically put into those types of jobs. Okay. And the last two, sleep-related movement disorders, which they're really specific. That's when like a movement disorder is affecting your sleep. You know, have you ever heard of restless leg syndrome?
Yes, I have actually.
Yes, that's an example of where, yeah, you can't stop shaking your leg, but at night you can't get to sleep because you can't stop shaking your leg.
Mm.
Yeah,
Okay.
and the
Okay.
very last one are called the parasomnias, and they're really interesting. This is kind of what I did my dissertation on. As the name implies, these are the sleep disorders that historically and culturally are associated with paranormal activity. There you
Mm.
find kind of sleep paralysis, you know, so that feeling of your body's paralyzed, but your mind is awake. And there are these intruder hallucinations going on around you, nightmare disorder, this thing called exploding head syndrome, where as you're falling asleep, you hear these loud noises.
Mhm.
It's crazy there, but that's the whole range of sleep disorders. So 6 clusters.
That is quite extensive,
Yeah.
much more extensive than I was aware of. I've heard of narcolepsy,
Hmm.
and I've heard of insomnia, but the range in which you have provided our viewers with is that this is much more diverse and complex than a lot of us are actually aware of. I wanted to get to talking about stress. So a
Hmm.
lot of us are, it's common knowledge that stress can disrupt our sleep.
Yeah.
And since this podcast is specifically focusing on the Black community and our mental health, I
Mhm.
wonder if you could illuminate for us what are some specific stressors that are unique to the Black community that could be disrupting the quality of sleep that we're receiving.
Well, I mean, first and foremost, it's estimated that 34% of Black people living in America have a sleep disorder.
Okay.
That is an astronomical number. That's a third.
Wow.
And there has been research that has shown 4 main stressors that are really specific to Black people. The first one can really just be punched under that umbrella: socioeconomic factors. Straight up, socioeconomic factors. You've got pollution. Air pollution is a really under recognized cause of sleep disorders. And I mean, I can just speak for the UK. You tend to find Black people in ethnically diverse environments to be cities. You don't really find countryside living to be a place where you see a lot of diversity, like London. That's where you find a lot of Black people, Manchester, Birmingham. And cross sectional studies have shown that exposure to petroleum derived hydrocarbons, so crude oil, is associated with self reported sleep disturbance.
Mhm.
Exposure to these things called particulate matter. And particulate matter, that's not an air pollution like a gas, that's dust, that's solid material that has been broken down into microscopic structures that you can't see, but are all around us in the city. They have a really strong association with sleep disorders as well, especially those disorders of hyper sleeping, excessive sleeping. So pollution is a big thing that the Black community is exposed to because of how Black people are kind of filtered into city living. The other the other socioeconomic factor is immigration. A lot of Black people find themselves under this term immigrant all around the world. And immigration, it's been shown that poor living conditions in a host country discrimination, differences in culture can be related to poorer sleep health. And understanding the relationship between socioecology and sleep pattern can add to the cross-cultural exploration of sleep and provide insight into variation of sleep biology. But this thing about the immigrants, which is so sad, is immigrants are very at risk of PTSD, of trauma. And PTSD has been associated with disruption to both slow wave sleep, so that's your first 3 stages of sleep, and rapid eye movement sleep. Who's at risk of PTSD? Immigrants, like I was saying. And the literature suggests that the co-occurrence of sleep problems and memory problems in patients with PTSD is not just a coincidence. It's that these 2 symptoms are meaningfully related. So what I'm saying is that when you have PTSD, you tend to have bad sleep and memory problems, but we're seeing that bad sleep can actually cause memory problems. And immigrants are at risk of PTSD, and a lot of Black people find themselves in that cluster. The second stressor to really focus on, so that's kind of the low socioeconomic status. The second one, which is really, really fascinating, is this thing called the psychosocial experience of racial discrimination. So racism and perceived discrimination have come to the forefront of chronic stresses contributing to racial disparities in sleep. Okay? So according to the model of racism is a unique and pervasive chronic psychosocial stressor that triggers physiological and psychological stress responses. So what that's saying is that when you receive racism, it is internalized. You experience a reaction to racism that's very specific. So there was a study that found that individuals who have been exposed to unfair treatment are more likely to worry at night and are more likely to do this thing called ruminate. So what is rumination? Rumination is a really maladaptive form of coping with an experience. It's when you've received a microaggression and you're sat there wondering to yourself, was that racism? Was that targeted at me? Was that an issue? You're there thinking about it, and that keeps you up at night. And the thing with this rumination is that racism can affect Black people at a very young age. A lot of people say it's about 8 years old when they started to be victims of racism. And when your brain is exposed to that ruminating habit, your brain starts ruminating about everything. Any inconvenience that happens to you, your brain is like, well, I have a way to adapt. I'm going to ruminate. So they found that one reason why Black people do struggle to sleep is because of this ruminating and this worry that's linked to experiences of racism.
The rumination that is fascinating. I mean, I think about my own experiences of microaggressions that I have faced at school, through casual interactions, or at work. And these experiences happen to us, and it puts us in a state, like you said, of just constant wondering and thinking and trying to codify what was the person intending? Were they saying this? Were they not saying this? It keeps you up at night. You're calling your siblings, you're calling your friends, explaining to basically reliving this experience over and over, trying to extract meaning and understanding. And it, as sad as it is, it almost serves us better that a person is more blatant in their discrimination, because then we can just name it and say what it is. But the fact that it leaves open the door for this curiosity of trying to make sense of something that happened to us is really at the detriment of our sleep and ultimately our health.
Yeah, and like you're saying as well, that's why they call this form of coping like a perseverance strategy, because it causes that experience to be relived and relived and relived. You mention it to a group of 5 people, one person might be like, no, I don't think it was racism. I just think they were just being a bit rude. I don't think it's racism.
Crazy? Maybe I am crazy. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Gaslight yourself. And for it's 10 years later and you're still thinking about it.
Yeah.
And the last kind of stressor, which I find fascinating, is this thing called lordosis, right?
Mhm.
So what is lordosis? Lordosis is a disorder where the lumbar region of your spine, so that's the bottom of your spine, is curved inwards excessively. Okay? Now, Black women are disproportionately diagnosed with lordosis. This is where it gets interesting. A study investigated differences in lumbar lordosis in Black and white females to try to explain why Black women have a greater burden of lordosis than white women. Very long story short, this study found that the reason Black women have a greater lordosis burden is because of an apparent lordosis angle. So, what I mean by apparent lordosis angle, what that is that, as the research said, due to Black women having more prominent buttocks, right? It tends to the
No better way to say it.
we're gonna say because of the booty, we're gonna say the curved spines the spine curves inwards more frequently. Not because of some genetic problem, but just because of just a racial phenotype. Those are just differences in your spine to just accommodate for just an extra mass, literally. But clinical impression of that is, oh, she's got lordosis. But that's not the case. And this study found that actually most of these Black women did not have lordosis. They just had apparent lordosis. But why is this relevant to sleep disorders? Because chronic pain is a cause of sleep disorders. And this apparent lordosis angle, the issue is that because of how the spine curves, those muscles at the base of the spine never get a break. Because when you rest on a mattress and you go to sleep, the mattress is flat, right? But your spine is kind of curving like that. Bit of a rough kind of image. But your spine is curving like that. You're not getting any weight taken off of your spine.
Yeah.
So in that way, you actually start to mimic lordosis. But that's a really easily manageable thing of just getting just a little bump, a little mattress bump that can fit on your chair, a desk like on a bed, to just take the weight off. But that's an example of where mattresses weren't catered to every racial phenotype.
Interesting. So what's interesting about this is that, I mean, when we're talking about the sleep disturbances of Black people, now this is an issue that's also extending into the manufacturing of consumer goods.
Yeah.
And what I'm hearing you say is that there is somewhat of a bias in the design and manufacturing of some of these products that are based on a European standard of what the body is supposed to look like. At the consequence of the health and the sleep health of African American, or excuse me, of Black women. And it makes me think about like the hair care industry, how for the longest time the needs of Black women's hair was not being catered to. So we had to use these products that weren't necessarily formulated for hair at our consequence. Now that was more of an aesthetic, but when we're now talking about something like a bed or a chair, that is actually putting our health at risk.
Yeah. And it's lending itself to the sleep disorder disparity. It is so sad when you realize that this is like real. This is happening. You know what I mean? On something as simple as a mattress.
Yeah.
You know?
So Roy, I wonder if you could talk a little bit. I know sleep disorders disturbance does not exist in isolation. And clearly, if people are having a difficult time getting a proper sleep, that has to have some sort of impact. It's got to reverberate into the quality of their health. And are they more susceptible to certain diseases or illnesses? Could you elaborate on some of those?
Absolutely. I mean, sleep disturbance has a really insidious effect on your health. And I use that word insidious because the things that are affected are those vital but invisible parts of your body. Your immune system, your endocrine system, so your hormones, they are really maintained and therefore affected by sleep. So if you aren't sleeping, you will not be able to pay as much attention to as many things. So you can't work as well in your job because you're now sleep deprived. You can't really concentrate on anything. All of a sudden, you've lost a promotion. Now you can't afford a new mattress because you didn't get that promotion. Now your lack of sleep is causing your immune system to run low. So you're taking more sick days off of work as well. And then you've lost another promotion. And
Yeah.
now you're getting depressed because you feel cursed. You can't work out what is going on. That's the kind of insidious effect of it. In terms of like really, not insidious, let's say point blank disorders, cardiometabolic disorders are what's really affected by sleep. Hypertension, diabetes, coronary heart disease. Diseases which have a disparity between African American and Black people at large and other races. And there's a bi-directional relationship there. What I mean by that is sleep can cause heart problems, and heart problems can cause sleep problems. And in both of these disorders, Black people are most at risk.
Yeah.
You know? So it's the truth is that sleep incorporates so many bodily systems that really it is fine to be very general and say that sleep will affect every region of your health. Every aspect.
Every aspect of your health and also your economics. You're sick or you can't sleep, you're most likely to get sick. You get sick, you are most likely to have to take more time off of work. You have to take more time off of work. You are at risk of not getting a promotion. You don't get a promotion. You don't get more money. You don't get more money. You don't climb up the economic ladder. How does that, what impact does that have on your family, on your immediate community? It's all just so interconnected, I think is the point that, that you're driving home, is that we can't look at sleep as this isolated problem that's just about you and not being able to go to bed, but it actually has so many reverberations that are so wide and large and necessary to understand the implications.
Yeah, it is. It's crazy. I mean, I remember I was on the train and I saw an advert by IKEA. And IKEA said at the very bottom, they were advertising pillows. They looked very comfortable. The little advert at the very bottom, the phrase was that tomorrow begins tonight. And I looked at that and I went, that is so true. If I don't sleep well tonight, my entire day tomorrow is ruined. I will have more arguments tomorrow. You know what I mean? People will get on my nerves more.
Most likely to say something inappropriate to the boss that probably is not going to land you in his or her good faith. Yes.
Exactly. And that's a perfect example of this thing about sleep disorders. And like we said about oversleeping, it's if you're sleeping too much, you might miss events. You know what I mean? You might miss your wake up to go to work. It's crazy.
This is fascinating. Sorry, we only have a little bit of time left. I want to get to two more questions. Yeah. So we recognize that sleep health disparity is a huge issue that's affecting the Black community. My question is what is the current body and quality of research related to Black people and sleep health within the medical community in terms of not only diagnosis, but also treatment?
Yeah. So this is where I found this talk so important, because the big issue with research at the moment is that it can identify race disparities, but then it leaves it at that. And it leaves the reader feeling that like Black people are cursed because of our African heritage, that we are just bound to this life of disease and Black bodies are genetically hardwired to go wrong. When that's not the case, there's a really amazing piece of research that was looking at two pre-industrial societies, the San and the Hadza. So they're in Namibia and Kenya. And they found that these communities didn't even have a word for insomnia. They're ancient societies that have been around for tens of thousands of years, but they have never really experienced insomnia enough to have a word for it, which I found that important just to kind of, as a piece of research, just to remind Black people that it's really our society and where we find ourselves, not our genes. But overall, the quality of research is quite basic. There is a systemic bias where Black people are made to feel like these types of issues are our problems, when they're a societal problem.
Yes.
The problem is that something like this normally it's like a Black researcher that's been exposed to it, so they want to research it, but there's not that much funding in this body of research because the wealth is not in Black hands, and before
Yes.
you know it, there's not that much space to even do research
Yes.
on this,
Yeah.
you know? So
Mhm.
the quality is, overall, I'd say it's basic, but we're getting there, you know? We're starting to put a bit of
Right.
effort in.
I see. I agree. I see the necessity of research and looking into these issues because they're relevant, they matter, and they have so many ramifications, not just on a personal health level, but also societal level as well.
Yeah,
And, when I think about even besides research and just having more money, I mean, a fundamental change that could just take place is when you go to the doctor's office, it should be part of your vitals in addition to taking your blood pressure, taking your weight, asking you, what's the quality of your sleep like? I know you're here for this issue dealing with, you're having, hypertension or you're here for obesity. I just kind of want to know, like, let me just take a note. How much sleep are you getting at night? And,
yeah,
just kind of doing a basic assessment and inquiry, I think would
yeah,
be valuable information for medical providers in
yeah,
providing appropriate care, not just treatment, but also providing counseling, necessary next steps that people can take to really improve the quality of their sleep. I think it's something that's just being overlooked, and it's
absolutely.
interconnected to so many things that it just doesn't make much sense.
No, it doesn't.
Wow. Well, Roy, I want to say thank you so much for joining us today. I also want to acknowledge that it was your birthday a couple of days
Yes, it
ago. So
was.
happy birthday. You turned 23 years old.
I
It
did.
is it is such a gift to have a bright mind like yours enter into the
Thank
field
you.
of neuroscience. And I see a tremendous future ahead of you. So congratulations.
Thank you so much, Erica. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. Have a
Thank
good
you.
day.
You too.
So our next guest is Aisha Giselle Dornley. Aisha is an expert life coach, solution-focused hypnotherapist, and psychotherapist. Aisha has over 9 years of experience helping individuals build their confidence and self-resilience to rise above the pressures and stresses of their hectic days. Help free them from troubling emotions, anxiety, shame, all while supporting them to fulfill their potential. Aisha, welcome to the show.
Hello, Erica.
Aisha, Roy helped give us a comprehensive understanding of sleeping disorders and their impact on Black people through a socio-cultural economic lens. I'd love for you to help our viewers understand the science of sleep a little bit more. So my question to you is, how do common mental health issues such as anxiety and depression play a role in sleep disorders?
Good question. Okay, so first of all, I'm going to tell you a bit about the brain. So it's important to understand how the brain works in order for you to understand anxiety, depression, and stress. Okay, so first of all, we've got two parts of the brain. Okay, which is the intellectual part of the brain. Okay, and when we're in the intellectual part of the brain, we cope better. We're able to come up with solutions. We're generally more positive. We're rational. We're more creative. We simply cope better when we're in this part of the brain. Okay? And then we have the primitive part of the mind. Okay? And the primitive part of the mind is like an older part of our mind. It was used to help us survive in the older days. Okay? And when we're in the primitive mind, we can only operate in the fight, flight, and freeze response. Okay? And it needs to do that so that we can survive. So it sees things from the worst case scenario. It's negative. It's very rigid. Okay? And it also holds our unhelpful behaviors and patterns and behaviors and habits. And it also controls our chemical responses in our mind and our body. Now, when we're in this part of the mind, it's really difficult for us to come up with solutions. Okay, we don't cope well when we're in this part of the mind. Okay, it's better for us to be in the intellectual part of the mind. So we're in the primitive part of the mind. We're much more emotional. we have much more stronger emotional responses. Okay, so as I said, we can only operate in the fight, flight, and freeze response. Okay, so let me give you an example. Imagine if you go outside today, open up your front door, and you saw a polar bear. What would you do?
I would run fast as I could.
Exactly. You would be out like a shot. Literally,
Yeah.
you'd be off. Okay, so what's happening is your primitive mind is much more stronger than your intellectual part of mind. It sees things 6 seconds ahead of your intellectual part of mind. So anytime it sees or perceives danger, it's on high alert. The amygdala rings its bell. Okay, it's saying there's danger. It increases your power. It sends chemicals around your body. Okay, you see your hands start sweating. It makes you more powerful, so you can be off like a shot and come away from the danger.
Yeah.
And that's great when you're in that type of scenario. Okay, and the same way we see polar bears is the same way we see any type of threat in our daily lives. Okay, so bills, relationship problems. Okay, anything that we perceive as a threat, we would have that same response. Okay, and the thing about the primitive mind is older and more powerful than the intellectual mind. So once it sees a threat, and if the emotion is strong enough behind that, it will shut down the intellectual part of mind. And you want it to do that in that scenario, because you don't want to think, okay, has this polar bear eaten already? Maybe it's tamed. And that's what the intellectual part of mind will do. It makes sense of the situation. Okay. Now, the reason why I say this is because now it's going to help you to understand how anxiety, depression is created. So anxiety is created by negative thinking. Every single negative thought contributes to anxiety. Okay, so anxiety could be you negatively forecasting the future, okay, or ruminating about the past. Okay, and then the thing with anxiety is anxiety can keep you up at night. Okay, it can really affect your sleep. Okay, because it's you overthinking. So one thing about anxiety and also the primitive mind, so when you are experiencing anxiety, it's like the flight response. Okay, and when you're experiencing high levels of anxiety, you're in the primitive part of mind, the part of mind that you don't really want to spend most of your time in, that survival mode. Okay, now with the primitive part of mind, it's obsessional. Okay, so what happens is once it has a negative thought, it will go over that thought again and again and again, because it needs to make sure it can keep you safe. It's basically trying to identify what's the threat here, what's happening, have I experienced this before? Okay, so it's obsessional, it's hyper vigilant. So when that alarm bell goes off, it's looking for clues of when I can experience this situation again. So when you are really anxious, that is exactly what's happening. Okay, the moment you get a negative thought and you attach powerful emotion behind it, okay, your brain is saying, what's happening? Let me go over this situation to find out, what's the cause? How can I get myself out of this situation? And it will keep you on red alert. Okay, and that will affect your sleep. The reason being is because you're not going to be able to go into deep sleep, simply because your mind, your subconscious mind, is on high alert. It's always thinking, okay, there's danger around. Okay, so that's anxiety. And then we've got depression. So depression is linked to the caveman times. So in the caveman times, you may be living in a cave, okay, and you would want to come up outside, but the weather might be really bad, or there might be danger outside. So you go back into your cave and put your rug over your head and kind of hibernate. Okay, and that's linked to modern day symptoms of depression. So what you notice when you're quite depressed is that you sleep a lot. Okay, and then you will feel like you're stuck. Okay, just like when you're in that cave and you can't go out, you feel like you're stuck in life. Okay, and the reason being is because you're in your primitive part of the mind. When you're in your primitive part of the mind, you can't come up with solutions. Okay, you need to tap into your intellectual part of mind. So the intellectual part of mind is where you come up with solutions. So if you're depressed and you're in the primitive mind, you feel stuck. You feel stuck in life. You don't know how to come up with a solution. Okay, and another thing what happens when you're depressed is that all the feel-good neurotransmitters, your body is no longer producing those. So oxytocin, dopamine, okay, serotonin. Your body slows down, just like caveman days. So it's repeating those unhelpful behaviors and patterns, okay, to help you to survive. Okay, so basically what you're telling your mind is, I feel stuck, so I can't get out of the situation. So your body will slow down, reserve your energy. Hence the reason why it's so difficult to do things when you are in a depressed state. Okay, there's a chemical response happening as well as an emotional response and a mental response. So that's how anxiety and depression is created. Okay, so the thing with anxiety, especially, okay, is every single negative thought creates anxiety. Okay, and then what happens is we've got a way to store that negative thinking, that energy, and where we store it is what we call the stress bucket. Now we can't see the stress bucket, but let's just imagine a bucket, okay, and all the stresses of the day fills up into this bucket. Okay, now every single thing we do is a stress on our body. When we sit up, it's stress. When we talk, it's stress. And it's not necessarily that it's bad stress. We've got a certain amount that we can fill up this bucket with. Okay, but anytime you start overworking, or if you're constantly negatively thinking, you're adding tremendously to this stress bucket. And then all of a sudden, what you see is that your stress bucket starts to overflow. Now, the thing is, you cannot see or feel when your stress bucket is rising. Okay, the moment you notice that you're a little bit stressed, that's when your stress bucket is already overflowing. Okay, so this is where sleep problems happen, sleep disorders happen, diseases, okay, skin problems. Things are not working out in your life. That's because your stress bucket is overflowing. And what's happening is, instead of you being in your intellectual mind, you're in your primitive part of the mind, where you don't cope too well. Okay? And the thing with your stress bucket is there's only one way to empty out this stress bucket. And that's via REM sleep.
Oh, so let us, we all face polar bears, and we see them at work, we see them outside, sometimes we see them in our own house, we see them everywhere, and I can see how this contributes to the stress in our lives and ultimately affecting the quality of sleep that we're having. So if this REM sleep is so important, what exactly is REM sleep?
So REM sleep is the lighter part of sleep. So as Roy said, there's different stages of sleep. So you go to deep sleep, but when you get into REM sleep, is the lightest part of sleep. So basically, you're able to make sense of what's happened through your day. Okay, so let me give you an example. Say, for example, you go out, you're going through your day, and then someone really, really annoys you. Okay, you come back home and you pick up your phone and you call your friend and you're like, do you know what? I'm so irritated, blah, blah, blah. This person really annoyed me. You're very stressed and frustrated. And you're just in your feelings, you're in your emotions. Okay, then you go to sleep. During the night, something will happen and you'll wake up in the morning and you think, do you know what? Why did I even let that person bother me? Okay? Why did I even let that person bother me? You feel so much more better about the situation, and you feel more relaxed about the situation. The reason being is because you've had a sufficient amount of REM sleep. So REM sleep is about 20% of your sleep. So in order for you to get that 20%, you need to get at least 7 to 8 hours of good sleep. Okay, and what happens during the REM sleep is, what happens during your day, it's pushed into the primitive part of the mind, and it's basically attaching emotions to your events, and it's making sense of your events of your day. So as it's going through your primitive part of the mind, adding emotion, it's now bringing it up to the intellectual part of the mind, where it's reasoning, it's making sense of your days, okay, and storing it into the necessary parts, your mind, okay? So then, as I said, when you're in your emotional part of the brain, you're often frustrated, you're stressed, you see things at worst case scenario. So during the sleep, it's bringing you up into the intellectual part of the mind where you're able to make sense of the situation. So maybe you can kind of rationalize the actual situation. That's why when you wake up, you'll feel much better. And that's the reason where we got that term sleep on it. Okay? Yeah? Sleep on it. Okay? Because it allows you to come out of your emotional mind and into your intellectual mind where you can cope better with situations. Okay? Does that make sense?
Perfect. That's fascinating. That is fascinating. Wow. So how does a person then break the cycle of overworking the REM sleep?
Okay, so basically with the REM sleep, so what we need to understand is so for example, we've got anxiety. So when you're suffering from anxiety and you're really anxious, okay, you're worried about the bills, you're worried about relationships, times are hard, you're stuck, that would cause you to increase your anxiety, and then that would leave you overthinking before you're sleeping, okay? And that means you're struggling to get to sleep, okay? That means you have less amount of sleep, especially if you have to wake up early for work, okay? Then you don't get enough quality sleep, hence you don't get enough REM sleep. That means you cannot empty out your stress bucket, because the only way to empty out your stress bucket is with REM sleep. Okay. So that means you wake up in the morning with half a bucket full of stress, and then you're pouring back into that bucket the next day. So then you're in a vicious cycle. So that's when you've got anxiety. So then when we've got depression, for example, that means you may be able to get to sleep. However, because the depression is exhausting, it overworks your sleep. So you're getting too much sleep, okay? And then what it will do is kick you out of the sleep, okay? Because your REM is overworking during the times of a depressive state, okay? And that means you don't get a quality amount of REM sleep, and you wake up exhausted and tired, which then means you go back to sleep. So you're going into a vicious cycle. You're not getting a quality amount of REM to empty out your stress bucket. So each day you wake up, especially when you're depressed, you think you've had enough sleep because you've slept for a longer period of time, but you haven't had quality REM because you're kicking yourself out of REM because you're overworking the REM. That means when you wake up, your stress bucket is still overflowing, okay? And that means when your stress bucket is overflowing, you're stuck in the primitive mind rather than the intellectual mind where you cope better, you feel better, okay? And you get those feel-good neurotransmitters. Now, how do we break that cycle? The way to break that cycle is to stop adding to the stress bucket. So what causes you to increase the stress in the stress bucket is overworking. When you're overworking, you're adding way too much to the stress bucket, okay? And negative thinking. Every single negative thought adds to the stress bucket. So we want to reduce the amount of negative thinking, all right? Now, what I would never say to a client is don't think negatively, because when you tell someone to stop thinking negatively, what do?
Think negatively.
They start thinking negatively, okay? And then you're back into that cycle. So you're adding more to that stress bucket. So what we want to do is not tell ourselves, don't think negatively, just catch ourselves when we are thinking negatively and try and change our thoughts. So think of something positive. So one thing that we use in solution-focused hypnotherapy is what we call the 3 Ps. Okay? So the 3 Ps helps you to reduce negative thinking, because you cannot be thinking negatively and positively at the same time. So 3 Ps is 3 positive things that you can do, okay? And you can't think negatively and positive at the same time. So the 3 Ps, let me give you the 3 Ps. The first one is positive thinking. All right? So you want to think positively as much as you can. So anytime you have a negative thought, find a way to distract yourself and think of something positive.
Okay.
The next one is positive activity. All right? So we want to get as much positive activity into our day. And the last one is positive interaction. Okay? We are social beings. It's so important that we have good interactions, it increases our neurotransmitters. So those are the 3 positive P's.
So think positive, positive activity, and positive interaction are the 3 P's.
Yes.
So this sounds great, but how does someone like myself or someone who's watching, how can we begin to actually activate these into our lives?
Excellent. Good questions. Okay. So let's start off with the first one, which is thinking positively. Okay. There's so many different ways that you can think more positively. Okay. So you can start your day off with meditation. Okay. That stimulates your mind into thinking positively. Okay. You can use guided meditations. Okay. Guided hypnosis. That programs your brain to think more positively. Okay. You can start off your day by expecting your day to go well. Okay. So always tell my clients, take about 3 minutes in the morning. Okay. And just expect your day to go really well. Okay. That's going to put you into a positive frame of mind. Okay. The next one is gratitude diaries. Okay. Get out your diary and think about all the things that you're grateful for. Okay. What you're thankful for. So you can do this at the end of the day. And that's going to be really, really good just before you go to sleep. Okay. So if you've got anxious mind, if you spend some time thinking about what am I grateful for? What am I thankful for? That is going to limit the negative thinking, okay, which is going to reduce the levels of anxiety, because anxiety is created by negative thinking. So that's the perfect way to do that just before you go to bed to improve your sleep. All right. The next one is positive activity. Now, we do not get nowhere near enough activity. We are meant to be moving. Okay. We are meant to be walking down fields and across lands, and we don't get enough activity. Minimum, we should be getting about 30 minutes of activity a day. So I don't mean you have to go gym, okay, and do hardcore workout, but simply walking. Anything that gets your body moving. Okay, so you want to think about what ways can I get my body moving? Okay, think about things that you like to do. Okay, maybe you can bring someone with you. It could be dance, it could be hiking. Okay, and it doesn't always need to be an activity where it's exercise. It could be things that you like doing, such as a hobby, painting, decorating, reading. Okay, all those things are positive activities. So when you're thinking positively, you're not thinking negatively. You're reducing your stress bucket, which would allow you to have better sleep and increase your REM. Okay, which would reduce the effects of sleeping disorders. Okay, and sleep problems. And then the last one is positive interaction. Now, we are tribal beings. Okay, now we are just like elephants and wolves. We work better, we cope better when we are in a tribal society. Okay, if you look at any tribal society, as Roy explained, they don't have a lot of sleep issues. Okay, because they work together. We can link it back to olden days. Okay, the reason why people cope better, had less stress, less sleep problems, okay, is because they worked as a collective and were in tribal communities. Okay, so they hunted together, they danced together, they cooked together, they surrounded each other when they was giving birth, and that has allowed them to cope better. The scientists have basically done studies on how that affects us, and that increases our serotonin. And when we're getting a good level of serotonin, we cope better, we feel good, we increase our quality of sleep. Yeah. Okay, so what we want to do is be around people that make us feel good. Okay, increase the level of positive interactions and reduce the level of negative interaction. All right, so aim to interact and connect a few times a day. All right, especially in these times. Okay, we have a pandemic when it comes to loneliness. All right, And
Yeah.
this is going to increase our negative thinking, which is gonna, so can you see the cycle? All right. When you're completely lonely, you feel like no one loves me, no one wants to be around me. That's increasing the negative feelings and the negative thought thinking. Okay. And that also adds to your stress bucket. Okay.
Yeah.
Stress bucket overflowing affects your REM sleep. You don't get a quality REM sleep. You're going to have problems in your sleep.
Yeah.
Okay. And that's going to increase any type of sleep disorder or sleep problem. Okay.
Yeah, Aisha, these are great. I love the examples of ways that we could incorporate these into our own life. And I'm even seeing the value of um, these three different things and even means that I go about trying to do on a daily basis to put myself in a good mindset. I meditate every morning, and I can notice a difference even in my behavior, in my mood, in my emotions, when I make time to just give myself that 15 minutes to just clear my head, clear my just clear everything out and really allow myself to just reconnect with myself. It's really, really powerful. And it's a huge difference night and day when I've meditated and when I haven't meditated in terms of just my overall behavior and conduct. And, you know, you said something interesting about positive interaction. And I know with the epidemic that it has really forced a lot of us to be separate from one another. And we've all seen and have felt the implications of not having that close connection and have relied on using Zoom and some of these other social platforms. But I think it also just speaks to the needs of or the importance of just that human contact and connection. I know, you know, I live overseas in the UAE, and I try to make it a point to just connect with somebody, just to get a cup of coffee, you know, like we could go to McDonald's or Starbucks, just to have that human interaction. I have them quite a bit already on my social platforms, but there's something about being with someone one-on-one where it's a different transmission of energy that you feel that just feels really, really good. So thank you for these wonderful suggestions. Aisha, my last question is, do you have any other suggestions on how to get better quality sleep that you could share with our viewers?
Yes, sure. So what we want to do, we have the power, okay? Most sleeping disorders, okay, can be greatly reduced or eliminated, okay, by reducing our stress, number one, and improving our sleep quality, okay? It's as simple as that, okay? So what we have is the power to improve the quality of our sleep by what we do before and during sleep. Okay, so let's think about what we do before our sleep. We can create a routine. Now, our mind likes routine. Okay, it works well with routine. So think about your evening routine. What do you do in the evening to prepare yourself for sleep? Okay, so by creating a good evening routine to prepare yourself for sleep. So this is all about prioritizing your sleep. Make it one of your top priority. If you want a good health, okay, if you want to have better quality of sleep, as Roy explained, it's going to have a knock-on effect in every different area of your life. You want to prioritize your sleep. So make an effort to get yourself into a good evening routine. You know, bath or shower, okay? Wind down, remove yourself from the TV and the phone. Set the mood, okay? Dim the lights, maybe use some candles, use the senses. Really think about the different ways that you can really enhance that evening routine to really prepare you for that good quality sleep, okay? So think about what works well for you. You can go on Pinterest, you can go on Instagram, you can go on social media and look at different examples, okay? And be inspired by different people's evening routines, okay? And formulate your own. Okay. Another one is that you don't want to eat too late. All right. Because if you eat too late, your body is overworking. Okay. And that means your body, where it should be working on sleep, it's working on trying to digest your food. So try and stop eating for about 2 to 3 hours before sleep. Okay. Have a warm bath or have a warm shower. Okay, studies show that the drop in temperature when you come out of the warm shower or bath makes you feel more relaxed and tired. Okay, preparing you for sleep. Okay, think about sunlight. Now, our bodies are trained to be awake during sunlight and be asleep during darkness. Okay, so think about your environment. Okay, is there light coming out from outside? So what Roy said, which is really, really interesting, and it's true, a lot of Black people live in city areas, and in the city there are loads of street lights and night lights. And if you live in flats or houses in the buildings, there's loads of light coming in through your windows. So what we want to do is create darkness. Get your room as dark as you can. Okay, it will tell your body. So what happens is the darkness will tell your brain that it is ready for sleep. This is time for sleep. Okay, so this is what you want to do to prepare yourself for sleep. Okay, good ways that you can optimize your REM and help you to fall asleep faster is guided hypnosis. Guided hypnosis or meditations, okay, will help you to fall asleep faster. Okay, it will limit the anxious thoughts, and it will take you into a deeper sleep where you can optimize your REM sleep. Okay, temperature is key. So you want to provide a nice cool temperature for sleep. If it's too cold, it's going to keep you up. If it's too hot, you're not going to be able to get to sleep. All right, so you want to get the right temperature for you, but you want the room to be really cool. Okay, there's even there's these pads that you can get. So it's not an electric blanket, but it's pads that you can get, and it's really, really good, especially if you sleep with a partner. Okay, and what happens is you can put these pads, they're quite expensive, but you can put these pads underneath your sheets. Okay, and then you can find the right temperature for you. Okay, that's right for your body. Okay, and you can set it on one side for yourself and another temperature for your partner, because we have different body temperatures. Okay, and we've got different needs, as in what temperature works for us to get to sleep. And by using one of these pads, it basically will work through the night to make sure it's at the right temperature for a good night's sleep. So there's so many different gadgets out there that's there to help improve the sleep. There's gadgets out there that would use what soldiers use, whereby they use a breathing technique. Okay, and the gadget would help you to breathe at a certain time, and then it would basically help you to get to sleep better. So there's so many different ways. You want to eliminate the noise. Okay, so if you're living in a noisy environment, okay, get some earplugs. We really want to prioritize, and you have the power. Okay, you can make the choices to get really good quality sleep. Okay, there's small little things that you can do to really impact.
And what I love is that you've provided such a plethora of just easy and accessible tools and changes that people can just make right in this moment. And they don't need to spend a lot of money. Just like you said, just avoid having the late night snacks. Try to have them a little bit earlier before you go to bed so it doesn't disrupt your sleep. And setting up some of these really nice night routines, baths and candles, and just dimming the lights. It's so simplistic, and it's something that's so easy. And then you were referencing self-hypnosis. I know sound meditation is really big. You can go on YouTube and you can listen to some of those audios just for free, and it'll really help put you to sleep. I know I have experienced the benefit of listening to sound meditation at night when I'm having difficulty, and I am out in 10 minutes snoring like a baby. So I can speak to the value and to the effectiveness of those things.
Yes, I've got clients, every single client, I give them a sleep meditation. Okay. And the first thing I ask you when you come to me, I'm asking you about your sleep, because your sleep tells you so much about your general health and well-being. Okay. And I give them these sleep CDs, Can I say, listen to this every single night until you get into a good routine. And some of them have not slept for more than 4 hours for years. And the moment they've listened to these CDs, they're like, Aisha, I slept for like 9 hours straight with no interruptions. So yes, you can go on YouTube, okay, and just look for sleep meditations, and there's loads that you can have.
Wow. Aisha, thank you so much. This has been great suggestions. You have given us, myself and our audience, just a wealth of information of understanding the science of sleep better and what we can do to make sure that we have a healthy night's sleep. So thank you very much for joining us.
You're very welcome. It's been a pleasure talking to you today, Erica.
Thank you. Well, thank you everyone for joining Black Mental Health Matters today. We look forward to seeing you next week as we continue to bring awareness to Black mental health issues. Have a wonderful day.